Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're diving deep into All the Light We Cannot See. It's historical fiction, right? And this book, the novel, really kind of sets a new standard. It won the Pulitzer Prize, and it really, really lives up to all the hype.
Oh, it does, definitely. Doerr, the way he captures World War II, the vastness of it. But he also zooms in on these really personal stories of Marie-Laure and Werner. It's amazing. It's historical fiction done right, meticulous research, but also these deeply human characters. It's great.
Yeah, and the way their paths cross.
Yeah.
You've got a blind French girl and a German orphan. And it really shows how, even in the darkest times, there could be these unexpected connections. That's something that stuck with me.
Right, and that's what makes it so powerful. It's not just a war story. It's about resilience. It's about humanity, even in the midst of all this devastation. And it's about how connection, can go beyond these boundaries. It's really something.
I really like how Doerr starts the novel, 1934. Before the war really takes over Europe, we see Marie-Laure's world in Paris, living with her dad, who's a locksmith at the Museum of Natural History.
Yeah.
It's almost like this idyllic life. You can see these little hints of what's coming, the approaching storm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like when Marie-Laure, she smells gasoline, right?
Right.
And it's this almost you barely notice it, but it's a sign of the military, building up around her. And then there's Werner in this German mining town, and he's fascinated by this broken radio he found. Two very different worlds, but both on the edge of this huge change.
It's interesting how Doerr uses objects to show the world changing. Marie-Laure sees toy soldiers everywhere, more and more. And Werner, he's mesmerized by this clockwork aquaplane. They both kind of foreshadow this war machine that's coming.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how these things, they seem innocent at first, but they become, more ominous as the story goes on. It's like they're showing how war can twist, even the most normal things. It makes you think about how we miss those little signs, even when they're right there.
And then the war gets worse, and Paris has to be evacuated. Marie-Laure's dad, he has to protect this really valuable diamond, the Sea of Flames, and he sends her to her great-uncle Etienne in Saint-Malo. It's a scary journey. You really feel the chaos and fear of what's happening.
There's that part when her father gives her this model of their neighborhood. It's a small thing, but it's so powerful. It shows how important it is to hold on to, something familiar, something that means home when everything is changing. It's a tiny little piece of the world she's leaving behind.
It's sad, but also really beautiful. And then they get to Saint-Malo, to this strange house where she lives with her great uncle. He's a veteran from World War I, and he's haunted by what he went through. And his radio up in the attic, this thing from his past, becomes this lifeline for them, during the occupation.
And it's not just for information. It's a way to connect, to reach out from their little world. Doerr really shows how important radios were back then. They brought people together, gave them some hope when things were really bad.
And at the same time, Werner's life takes this dark turn. He's forced into this brutal Nazi training school, Schulpforta. The indoctrination, the training, the tough choices he has to make. Doerr doesn't shy away from how harsh it was.
Oh, yeah. The thing with Frederick, Werner's friend, he gets ostracized, punished for being weak. That's a chilling part. It shows how the Nazis, they wanted to crush any individuality, any compassion, blind obedience. That's all they cared about.
It's this stark reminder, how ideology can dehumanize people, how war can twist even our most basic instincts. And it's right here that the two stories, Marie-Laure and Werner's, they really start to come together. Saint-Malo becomes this battleground, and Werner's pulled into it.
That's it. He becomes a radio technician. His job is to hunt down the resistance broadcasters. But there's this conflict, inside him, his skills, his talents. He has to use them for something he doesn't believe in. That creates this inner struggle for him.
It shows that even on the wrong side of a war, people can have doubts. They can struggle with what's right and wrong. And it sets up this really powerful meeting between Marie-Laure and Werner.
It makes you wonder, right? How are they going to meet? What's going to happen when they do? It's like their fates are hanging in the balance and everything's at stake.
So last time, we left off with this almost inevitable meeting between Marie-Laure and Werner. It's just waiting to happen, right? But when they do meet, that's not the end of the story. It's really just the beginning.
Yeah, totally. And it's a tense meeting for sure. I mean, Werner's looking for these resistance broadcasters, and then he ends up at this bakery, and guess who's there? Marie-Laure. It's just
Yeah.
by chance. But it has, like, huge consequences, you know?
It makes you wonder about fate, right? How these almost random events can bring people together. Like, who would have thought? And it gets even more complicated because there's this whole thing with the model house, the one her dad gave her.
Oh, yeah, that model house. It becomes like this major symbol in the book. For Marie-Laure, it's this connection to her past, to her dad, to a world that's, gone now. But it also has a secret. There's this hidden part, and it might have the diamond, the sea of flames, hidden inside.
Which brings us to von Rumpel. He's this German officer, and he's obsessed with finding that diamond. He thinks it has, like, magical powers or something, and he's so desperate to, I don't know, cheat death. He becomes this kind of scary antagonist. Yeah.
I wouldn't call him a typical villain, though. There's something kind of sad about him, a sense of desperation. It almost makes you feel sorry for him sometimes. He's just, like, clinging to hope, even if it's based on, I don't know, a delusion.
That's a good point. He's a complicated character, definitely.
Yeah.
Doerr doesn't let you, like, make easy judgments about him. And as the story goes on, everything starts to come together. Werner's searching for the resistance, von Rumpel's after the diamond, and Marie-Laure is right in the middle of it all.
And then it all explodes in these, like, really intense emotional moments. Etienne, Marie-Laure's great uncle, he gets arrested by the Germans. And Werner, he does this unbelievably brave thing. He decides to help Marie-Laure, even though it goes against his orders and it puts him in huge danger.
That's like a turning point for Werner.
Mm.
He chooses compassion over duty, and he risks everything to help someone he barely knows. Doerr shows you how hard those moral choices can be, Even during war, people can still be incredibly kind, incredibly courageous. And then there's von Rumpel. He has a pretty dramatic end, consumed by this quest for the diamond. It shows how obsession can, like, destroy you, blind you to what's really important. Doerr doesn't sugarcoat how brutal war is, but he also shows these flickers of hope, of human connection in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, like with Marie-Laure and Werner, they come from such different worlds, but they find this connection that goes beyond, like, the whole conflict around them. It's amazing. So after all that, what happens to them? Do they find some kind of peace when the war's over?
Well, Doerr takes us to, like, the aftermath. We see how the war affected Marie-Laure and Werner even after it ended, how they try to rebuild their lives, how they deal with what they went through. He hints at what ultimately happens to them, but he leaves some things open. It makes you think about, like, the long-term impact of their journey.
It shows how the scars of war, not just physical ones, but emotional ones too, they can last for so long. And it makes you appreciate how skilled Doerr is as a writer. I mean, his use of symbolism, it's like masterful.
Yeah.
It really is. Take the model house, for example. It's not just a thing, right? It represents memory, how fragile life is, this connection to the past. And then you have light and darkness, these recurring themes, and they highlight the struggle between, I don't know, knowledge and ignorance, hope and despair, and how he describes the world through Marie-Laure's senses. Her blindness makes her so aware of sound and touch. It's just beautiful writing.
Yeah, his writing is so evocative. It's almost like poetry, but in a war story, And how he brings those historical events to life through these characters, it's really incredible.
Absolutely. It's not just about dates and facts. It's about how those events make people feel. Doerr makes you feel the weight of history, the personal cost of war, in a way that I think few other writers can.
Yeah, it makes you realize how history is often told us from a big, grand perspective, but it's the individual stories, the human experiences that really make it come alive.
Exactly. And that's what Doerr's novel does so well. It makes you face the human cost of conflict, see the war through the eyes of those who were there, both the victims and those who, inflicted the harm.
It's powerful because it reminds you that history isn't just something that happened a long time ago. It still shapes us today. It influences how we see the world. It reminds us how important empathy and compassion are.
One thing that makes this novel so powerful is that it doesn't give you easy answers. It asks these tough questions about morality, about the choices we make, about what good and evil really are. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish it. It makes you grapple with those questions yourself.
We've talked about, how complicated war is, the moral stuff, how it affects people. But I'm wondering, like, about the bigger impact of the book. How has all the light we cannot see affected readers and, I don't know, historical fiction in general?
Well, it won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction back in 2015, so that says something, right? But it's more than that. It's how readers connect with the story personally, that's what shows its real power.
That's interesting because I've heard from a lot of people who are really touched by it, especially, it seems, people who've experienced war or loss, firsthand.
I think that's because Doerr shows us something universal about being human, even in these crazy circumstances. He shows that even when things are really bad, there's still love, compassion, those little acts of kindness that, make life worth living.
And he asks tough questions, right? He makes you think about good and evil, about making the right choices, about how war can mess with how we see ourselves, how we see each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it such an important book for historical fiction. It's not just telling you what happened, it's exploring what it means to be human when things are at their worst. It makes us face those uncomfortable truths about how we can be cruel, but also how we can be compassionate.
I like how Doerr balances those two sides, the dark and the light. You see the awful things about war, the brutality, the loss, but you also see how strong people can be, those moments of beauty, of connection, even in all that destruction.
I think that's why it's so hopeful, even though it's about war. It shows that even when you're going through something terrible, there's still this flicker of humanity, this spark of hope. It can't be put out. And that's a powerful message, especially now.
One thing I think is amazing is how the book takes you to another time, another place. Doerr's writing is so real. You can almost feel the streets of St. Malo, smell the ocean air, hear the radio crackling.
Yeah, the way he uses your senses, it's amazing. And it's not just to make the setting feel real, it's about putting you, the reader, right into the emotions of the story. You experience everything through Marie-Laure. Her blindness makes her so aware of sounds, of touch.
It's like he's saying, look at the world differently. Pay attention to those little things you might miss. And it makes the story even stronger, more real.
And Doerr's attention to detail, it goes beyond just the senses. His research is really thorough, and he fits historical facts into the story, but without losing the emotional heart of it.
It's how historical fiction should be. Accurate, you feel like you're there, and it really moved you. That's why it's connected with so many people. It stays with you, it makes you think, it challenges how you see the world, how you see yourself.
It reminds us that connection is important, that we need to understand each other, and that the human spirit is incredibly strong. It's a good message for all of us.
So, to wrap up our deep dive into all the light we cannot see, here's some things to think about. What does this book say about the power of stories, how they connect us across time, across differences? How does Doerr make us rethink who's a hero, who's a villain during war? And what can we learn from all the light we cannot see about hope, about human connection, even when facing incredible suffering?
Those are big questions, and they're what make this novel so interesting, I think. It makes you want to explore history, humanity, and yourself in a way that's really deep and meaningful.
It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there's always light if you know where to look. And that light might come from somewhere you don't expect. A chance meeting, an act of kindness, a story that goes beyond words and time.
And that's the beauty of books, right? They can light up the world, connect us to each other, remind us how strong we are.
It's been great exploring all the light we cannot see with you. We hope this deep dive made you curious, made you want to read the book again, or maybe discover it for the first time.
And we hope you'll join us again soon for another deep dive into something fascinating. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for all the light you cannot see. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Bookercast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.